zoning code's definition of a person, which is scheduled for Monday, March 18, 2019 at 7 p.m. in Village Hall. If I can get this, you want to explain?
Well,
You want to tell us what a person is?
this I really could do in 30 seconds. It's just a technical amendment, so I'll take the definition of person in the zoning code. It's defined now as an individual or corporation. It should include more things like partnerships. So what the amendment does is define a person as an individual as well as a corporation, partnership, firm, association, joint venture, and organization of any type.
Wow. Very good.
We don't need to do secret on it.
You never know. Short form there. The only other announcement I have is that yesterday was the 90th anniversary of Officer George E. Dugan being killed in the village. It's one of those stories, you think about it, it was 1929, and they made a car stop, and the person had just had an armed robbery in town, so he had no idea who he was stopping. He was shot and he was killed right on Broadway. The perpetrator was eventually caught down in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He had kind of fled. There was a chauffeur, because it was probably 1929, so there weren't a lot of people who drove. He just started wildly shooting out of the car, which was probably not a very wise thing to do. He drove up to Ossining, and then he somehow made it back to the city. He dropped the chauffeur off in Ossining, then drove to the city, and they found the car the next day with shot out windows. But they caught him a few days later, and he actually killed himself. He was surrounded by Harrisburg police, and he took his own life. But George Dugan, I think, was only 28 years old, and his daughter is still alive. She lives in Texas, and she's 97 years old, and she has family as well. So we had a little memorial service down at the bridge, the George Dugan Bridge, which is the bridge that goes over the railroad tracks, with the police department yesterday. And we reached out to the family, and they're always very appreciative. We did it 5 years ago as well, but just want to give a quick mention to George Dugan today, 90 years after the tragedy happened, March 3rd, 1929.
Wow. Ms. Heskey, Mayor, we have a resolution on the public hearing?
Yes, I made a motion.
Oh, we never finished.
Can I get a second on that?
We didn't finish.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, we never did because we were such a great, yeah, you told us what it was about. So thank you, Brenda. Anyone else have announcements? Otherwise, we'll move on to correspondence, of which there is none, no general correspondence. So we'll open it up to public comment on anything not on the agenda. Anybody? Otherwise, we'll move to the consent agenda. Anyone have questions on this? Otherwise, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. If I can get a second. All in favor? Next, I'll make a motion to open the public hearing to consider local law amending the Irvington zoning code to permit short-term rentals. If I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's now open. So, Marianne, I thought, obviously this is the first time we're presenting this, so if we could go through kind of the law, some of the history, some of the misconceptions maybe, and we'll start from there. And, I think, if I could make an editorial comment before we even start, I think tonight is, since it's the first night of something that's kind of a potential large change, where it was something that's trying to address something that's potentially been going on for a long time. We don't plan on voting on anything tonight. We plan on listening tonight, similar to what we did with parking. This is another law where we're balancing different wants and needs. So I think, so at least on theory and on paper, we're very successful with our approach to parking in the downtown. So we'd like to take the same type of approach where, try to get everybody heard, tweak the law with some of the great input we receive from the public, and then eventually vote on it, in the coming months. But that's my one editorial tonight. So if anyone's expecting a vote tonight, you'll be disappointed. But hopefully we have some good, productive dialogue anyway.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Brian, about it being, it is a draft, and it is in process, and I'm sure the comments people make will be helpful.
And I think I'll say one other thing quickly. This did come out of the comprehensive plan as part of our, attempt at helping people to stay in their homes. We are very aware of the increasing taxes and some aging population, and we want people to be able to stay in town, and we also want some of the larger historic homes to not be divided up or changed into condos or something. So I think all of those things kind of pushed us into action, as well as the fact that this was already going on.
Right.
You know, so I think that we kind of had two options. We could have put our head in the sand, like I think a lot of municipalities did. But we think that we can make something that is more livable for everyone, as well as safer for guests. I mean, I think, you know, there's different reasons to have laws and regulations. But, you know, the safety of the people renting the homes, we have heard horror stories, not in Irvington, but in other places of, you know, people renting an attic that only had like a ladder and, you know, crazy things like that. And, you know, I think that if you don't have a law in place and you just kind of put your head in the sand, you can't prevent things like that either. So it's kind of a practical approach to safety, as well as, you know, regulating something that probably is hard to regulate, but, you know, I think it's something that we're going to attempt to do.
As Brian said, it did come out of the comprehensive plan committee, partly to enable people to stay in their homes, and partly as recognition that it's happening. And that was one of the purposes of the comprehensive plan update, was to kind of get current with what's going on in the 21st century, and certainly short-term rentals are part of it. Now, one thing that's really important to understand, it wasn't clear to me that everybody understood this from the correspondence, that right now it's not a permitted use. Short-term rentals are not a permitted use, because under our code it reads, these are the only uses allowed. And in most districts, single-family house. So this use is a new use. And it'll be an accessory use, and there's a lot, as you, those of you, I assume most of you read the law, there's, you know, quite a few regulations of it. The first thing is the definition of a short-term rental, which is rental of a whole or partial dwelling unit to visitors for dwelling, sleeping, or lodging for a period of no less than 24 hours or more than 30 consecutive days. A few people ask, where did that 30 consecutive days come from? It comes from the state building code. This is how short-term rental is defined in the state building code. We're trying to stay current, as close to the state building code as we can. It doesn't have the provision of no less than 24 hours, but it's probably a good idea to have that one. Okay, then, okay, then the next section, it might look from this draft law like it's only permitted in one-family residence districts, but that's how the law would read, because for both the two-family and multifamily districts, it says any use permitted in the 1F district, any accessory use permitted in the 1F district. So once it's permitted in the 1F district, it'll be permitted in the multifamily and the two-family districts. That same provision isn't in the business district, so we added that in the business district in one family, two family, and other dwellings. They're allowed. So essentially, they're allowed pretty much.
What page are you on?
On the first page, yeah. Okay, then to get to the regulations, we'll start on page 2. The purposes are to legalize and regulate short-term rentals and to ensure that they meet applicable health, fire, and safety standards, preserve the residential character of the village, as Brian said, to provide economic support for village residents, and then also to provide lodging for visitors to the village and encourage tourism in the village. The next section, 224-206, says registration is required. This is really important. It doesn't require a special permit. It doesn't require site plan approval. It doesn't require variances. You need to register with the building, with the, I believe it's the building department. It's several times. Think about where it should be registered. But you've got to meet all the requirements before it'll get registered, so it's not you just go in and register. You only register if you're sure you meet the requirements. Okay, and what are those requirements? Those are listed in 207. The dwelling unit in which I'm going to say STR unit, is located should remain a single dwelling unit with housekeeping facilities in common and be rented to not more than one family as defined in 224.3. Now, 224.3 defines family as up to 3 persons, because we're totally unrelated, up to 3 persons, or 4 or more persons occupying a dwelling unit and living together as a traditional family, or the functional equivalent of a traditional family. The definition goes on to show, you know, how you would determine those things. But essentially, because a couple of people say, well, why should I be able to rent to 2 people or 3 people? You can't. But the point here was it's still in a one-family unit, or one family part of a two-family unit, so you want what's there to be one family. So that's why that limitation is in there, so you couldn't rent out to, 6 unrelated people, who were there for a bachelorette party or something. Unless they're all sisters. Okay, second requirement is that the dwelling in which the STR is located must be the primary residence of the person renting out the STR unit. You have to live there. That's not to avoid the obvious, what happens in New York City, people buy the apartments, rent them out, make a lot of money. That's not the point of this. You have to live there. The dwelling unit in which the single short-term rental is located must have been in existence in its present size for at least 5 years prior to the initial application for registration. The purpose of that is so that somebody can't, just add a little bit onto their house to allow for the short-term rental unit. And I think those reasons are obvious. Okay, the dwelling has to be in compliance with the zoning code, the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention Building Code, the property maintenance code. For one family, whether they're attached or detached, and two-family dwellings, no exterior changes, including exterior lighting, can be made that would alter the one-family or two-family character of the residence. No sign other than the sign permitted by this section shall be allowed. What that sign permits is a 1 square foot sign with identifying the owner, resident, and address. The kind of sign any of you could have on your houses. Okay, short-term rental isn't permitted on the same lot as an accessory apartment. And then no more than 30 short-term rentals may be registered at any one time throughout the village. I think the board decided to put that in there just to put a cap at least for a while. I mean, I suppose if at some point that could always be changed if it seemed that there was 30 and, a few more wouldn't hurt, but it put some limitation on it because there was somebody who was concerned about that. And the number also seemed reasonable in terms of how many we saw, we've seen advertised. I mean, everybody knows that they're happening, and it just seemed like a reasonable number to start on. Okay. Then those are the requirements before you could get a registration. Then to operate, then there's requirements for operating a short-term rental. And the maximum number of days it can be rented out as short-term rental is 90 days per year. A short-term rental can't be used to host parties or other gatherings or other events. I know there was a suggestion made, why don't you say such as weddings, whatever. The problem is, when you put in such as, and your thing is not the same as the such as, you think you can get out of it. So we decided to go with a more generic term. Parties or other gatherings. Okay, a written notice. Now, the village will provide a form that contains information about relevant the village parking laws, garbage, recycling rules and schedules, snow removal, identify the person responsible for responding to complaints. And there'll be a form, and the person will may have to fill in some parts of it, like who's responding, who do you call, whenever. And that has to be left in a conspicuous location in there and maintained there. While the short-term rental is rented, the owner or the lessee of the dwelling has to be responsible and available during the entire time of the rental for the purpose of responding in 30 minutes to complaints regarding the conduct of occupants or guests. If they're not available, they have to designate a person to be responsible. Okay, and any person running out a short-term rental has to use their best efforts to ensure that the occupants or guests don't create unreasonable noise or disturbance or engage in disorderly conduct. If a person receives notification that an occupant has created unreasonable noise, then they have to respond within 30 minutes and make whatever effort they can to prevent the recurrence. They're subject to periodic inspections by the building department and the fire inspector. And then the person renting out the unit has to maintain a record of the number of guests and the beginning and ending dates of each short-term rental. So when you go in for your renewal, you make sure that it's the 90 days, if it kept within the 90 days, that was the purpose of that. And then on the registration procedure, you'll file the registration with the building department. The building inspector conducts a physical inspection of the unit to make sure that it complies with all the requirements that I mentioned earlier. Some people said, why should the building inspector do it? Well, maybe the argument being that, these people, B&B has its standards, and we want to meet those standards or whatever. The truth is, and the building inspector knows of some B&Bs where in fact they wouldn't meet inspection. And so if you're keeping a safe and code compliant space, it's no big deal. If you're not, there's a way to deal with it. And you can't register an STR if there's any unresolved code compliance issues, outstanding village fees, or unpaid taxes. The registration is annual, and has to be renewed annually. It will expire automatically when the ownership of the single-family residence changes. Somebody said, well, what about when the person moves out? Well, then it's not legal anymore, because it says that you have to be home while it's going on. And then for the people operating now, there's a 45-day window to register. If it's not registered in 45 days, you'll be not 45 days from tonight, but 45 days from when this is adopted, then you'll be violating the law. And then there's pretty standard enforcement provisions, and then another section amends the fees. The short-term rental registration fee is $250. There were a few comments made about that, why $250? You only need $25 fee for pallet, whatever. That's because this one really requires the village to spend some time reviewing and inspecting, whatever. So that's what that's about. And then on the renewal, it's $150. It would still require a building department inspection, but not to the same extent. I'm glad to answer any questions that
Yeah, but again, if I could frame the 50,000 foot view is to allow rental income for the reasons described versus not changing single-family neighborhoods. I think that's the balance we're trying to strike. And this is our first shot at it without having, typically we can look to some great laws that are in other municipalities, and it doesn't seem like nationally there's any really great laws.
There were.
Well, New York State is also quirky.
Yeah, not in New York. Nationally, there were a lot, but they didn't quite work for different reasons. Like they wanted to encourage them, or nothing seemed to work. Westchester County just doesn't have them. Mostly, and the spent a lot of time. I think it was in Bedford, working on a short-term rental law. And then when it got to voting on it, the people, and Bedford's code is very similar to ours. And it says these are the only uses allowed. So if it's not on use, it's not allowed. So it would have allowed it. But the people who wanted the short-term rentals came in and were opposed to the law because they didn't like the regulation of it. And of course, so they ended up arguing it against it, and then it was voted down 3-2. So it was not permitted there, but they didn't have too bad a draft. Their draft was pretty good, but they happened just recently. That's it as far as I know. And I did call a lot of the other, I called where I have friends who are the village attorneys or town attorneys, and it's kind of hard to deal with, and it hasn't been a problem, so we're going to let it go and whatever. I think they're waiting for somebody to take the lead on it. Anyway, so here we are.
Great. don't know if anybody up here wants to say anything first.
I'll wait till we hear from the public.
Sure. So who would like to open up tonight? First
I
hand
just
up.
asked for a point of clarification about the just definition of family part. I wasn't sure I caught.
Can we speak at the microphone?
We can't
Please
hear
speak at
unless
the
you-
Oh,
microphone.
sorry. I was just looking for clarification on the.
Come to the mic.
is up here.
Oh, I don't, this is not my statement. Well, I'm sure I'll have a statement, but I just wanted to see if I could get clarification on who's, how many people can be.
The term family is a defined term in our zoning code, and it was actually modified fairly recently, so it's the constitutional definition of family, and it's up to 3 persons occupying a dwelling unit, any 3 people, whether they're related or not, and then 4 or more people who are either related or acting, or are the functional equivalent of a family.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Okay, who'd like to be the first person to speak again? Please.
I just want to,
Can you just state your name, please?
Laura.
Laura Bruce.
Yeah.
I just want to understand if the objective is to help ease the financial burden on residents, what's the rationale of only allowing 30 houses at a time? That doesn't feel like
I
it's
think
significant.
a lot of it is that we're expecting opposition to doing anything, and it's a trial. If it suddenly works out well, and we have, often we have these limits, and it never comes close to anyone applying for them. So if we suddenly have 30 applications, if we suddenly have 50 applications, we could quickly say, you know what, let's start with 50. So that's something that we have in there as a backstop in case 5 apply and they're all disasters. We can say, well, at least we've capped it at 30. So it's more of a start. If it turns out that everyone's a good actor and we have all 1,100 homes want to do this and it's working out well, and then we can do that. This is a start. This is a trial. That's why there's also a 90-day limit. It might turn out that it can be 365 days a year for every place in town. We don't know. And as we said, earlier, there isn't a lot of law out there that would say, well, it worked really well in Bedford and it didn't work in Dobbs Ferry. Look at Mamaroneck, that was a disaster. It's just not out there. So we are kind of pioneering a little bit, so we want to have kind of tighter controls than we might otherwise have. In our village alone, we've had some unbelievably great actors that, people say, hey, this is going to slow this person down from doing this, and we say, we understand, we feel badly about that. And then we have other people who, every time they seem to do this, we had 5 calls to the police department. So we've seen kind of both sides of the spectrum. So we kind of said, let's start with a small number and see how that goes. And if it goes well, then we can potentially expand it as well.
Right.
The number 30 is fairly arbitrary. I think we started at 50 and said maybe we should make it smaller, if I remember correctly. So.
Just for what it's worth, I know this is a different thing, but the accessory apartments, I think we put an accessory apartment limit of 50.
Yeah.
And I think there's maybe 1
Or maybe 2.
or 2.
And I remember we debated that for almost a night, how many we should have. This might be more popular because I think there's probably, half a dozen at least, kind of in operation now. So, who's next? Please.
Hi, thank you so much. Ann Jeffy Holmes on 22 South Ferris Street, Irvington, and I thank you for some time to talk about this topic. I really hope that what I'm about to say will provide some information that will help the village optimize the potential great benefits that I see in short-term rental allowances in Irvington. I have to say first off that I am an Airbnb user. I have not been to a hotel for 9 years now. Ever since I applied for Airbnb, I can't even imagine staying in a hotel anymore. Airbnbs are fun. They're always super clean, super safe. I've been to them in Boston, London, New York City, Washington, D.C., Savannah, Salt Lake City, Seattle, San Francisco, Santa Fe. All these cities, I've never had a bad experience yet. It's kind of surprising. Even I'm shocked that I haven't had a bad experience yet. But what I find when I go to an Airbnb, there's always a reason that I'm going to the place that I'm going to, and then I'm choosing the location of the Airbnb I am. And usually it's a conference, a professional conference, or visiting relatives, or maybe an exhibit in the city, or an event, a concert, or something going on in the city. And so when I go to an Airbnb, what I do is I do the thing that I'm there to do, and I visit the people I'm there to visit, and I get up, check into my Airbnb, which has never been a problem for me, ever, and then I sleep. I get up in the morning and I walk to a local coffee place. I get breakfast. I do errands around the town, things that I need, batteries maybe for my player, or maybe I need something for my car. Then I buy my meals in that town. I go and I spend the time in the town. When I first moved to Irvington and I had some people visit me, and I didn't have any, I still don't know of any options I have for housing people in Irvington because my apartment's too small. They have to stay at the DoubleTree. They don't want to come here for coffee in the morning. They just go to the coffee shop. And they're all excited about, well, let's check out Tarrytown for dinner. Even though I say, oh no, you gotta come see my village, But when you open your village, a walkable village like ours, to Airbnbs, people want to do what's convenient and easy, and the town's cute, and we walk past the restaurant and they go, well, maybe we'll go there for dinner tonight. So I really believe that we would be opening our village businesses up to wonderful, outside dollars to come into our village, and to do it in a nice way where, they're staying in residence and they're introduced that way. So I think that it's a great boon to our economics in Irvington to have things like Airbnbs happening. If the problem and the fears are about noise, I think you legislate about noise. And the noisiest profession I know of that we have to monitor in Irvington is landscapers. That's the noisiest profession there is. It's constant, and I won't get into it, but what I think you need to do is legislate about noise, not about people sleeping at somebody's house and using the businesses of the village to enjoy staying in Irvington. If somebody in Irvington gets sick and needs family to come stay and they don't have room in their home, Airbnbs would be a wonderful alternative to staying at the DoubleTree. It would be a wonderful thing if they could stay in somebody's home in Irvington, instead of a hotel. And interns or people who are doing a summer job, for some business here in craft or something, this would be a wonderful alternative to stay in somebody's home if you're a young person with a new temporary job. I just think that this is a wonderful thing for a village like ours that's so walkable and warm. The last thing I wanted to, just 2 points I wanted to say too in the regulations is that I think 90 days is a little low because people stay at Airbnbs to save money, and the most I've paid for an Airbnb is $150. And so if you're charging $250 just to register, you're taking 2 nights off that person's, and you're giving them a limitation of only 90 days. You're really like scooping it down on them, I think that's pretty unnecessarily harsh. And I do think that the 90 days also would preclude somebody that was staying here for the summer to do, some kind of, like I said, an internship or something like that can happen. So I think those 2 things need to be looked at very carefully to optimize what you need to do for those. So I really thank you for listening to the public on this and for my long-winded statement. Thank you.
I just wanted maybe Mary Ann to qualify. If something longer than 30 days wouldn't apply to this, like someone staying the whole summer somewhere, it wouldn't have anything to do with this law.
Exactly. The code also allows borders, that's a
Borders.
use, yeah. And that might finish with that.
Could you describe the difference to that? I'm very confused.
About a border? Our borders, but right now, our borders are allowed in single family.
So what is a border then, as opposed to an Airbnb guest?
Well, border, you know what, it's not defined in the code, it's an old provision, but generally the thinking is a border is there with somebody there for a longer period.
long-term rental.
And isn't it one person?
One
One
room.
room could be, it's only one room can be used for a boarder, if I recall. It's in another part. Yeah.
And I think also when you get past 30 days, so if someone wanted to rent it for 90 days, it's like a sublease.
It's a sublet, yeah, and
It's
it's
not
not
it's not an
regulated at all.
Airbnb. So this is only for shorter than 30 days. So if someone wanted to stay the entire summer, that's a sublease, and it actually doesn't, this doesn't apply to it.
And the
But
village
you're saying
doesn't.
something is legal.
Yeah,
Yeah, the village
Yeah.
doesn't
you
get
can already do
involved.
that
in
now.
It only can be one person, it can't be a couple.
No, it could be.
No.
it
A
could
boarder
be
in one room.
It just can't be shorter than 30 days. It's like a
There are
quickie.
two things he's
And
talking about.
I think there's a weird concept that what the way the state views it from a safety perspective, and it's not me, this is the state. If you're going for 2 nights, you don't know your way around the house. If you go for 31 days, if you go for 30 days, you don't know your way around the house. If you go for 31 days, you're safe and you don't need all these safety things. I mean, where you cut it off, I don't know. I mean, maybe after a month, you really do know a place, but after 2 weeks, you don't. But that's one of the big safety laws about it. You basically become a de facto, you file bed and breakfast laws, so you have to have like egress or sprinklers, those types of things for Airbnbs. If it's a longer term rental, then I guess they assume that, you know your way around a house. I don't know what happens to you the first 30 days you're there, but that's the thinking of the state anyway. So that's why.
The same thing that happens when you buy your house.
Yeah, exactly. The first 30 days you're living in the house. Maybe you leave the bathroom light on.
So for enforcement purposes, though, how would you distinguish somebody who was a boarder? So I know that it sounded like enforcement was going to go through looking at the large web-based platforms to identify illegal tenants. So how would you distinguish between somebody who actually qualified as a boarder but who found their place that way?
I think that if you saw that someone rented on Airbnb and you said, hey, you're not registered, and they said, well, they're actually staying for 9 months. Okay, thank you.
So just you have it's an inquiry kind
I
of.
just have a point where I think it's important that this stuff gets documented to the point that someone can hear it on TV. So let's get a portable mic to pass around the audience if people aren't going to
I
come.
mean, this one is portable.
Yeah, well, so let's pass it back so that we actually have things being documented. Because, for instance,
People should be,
Brian, when you're answering.
Yeah, you can't hear what I'm answering.
No, you can't, you don't restate the question.
Anybody want the
right?
Sounds
mic
like you're
here?
doing a bad
Want to
monologue.
come up?
I think we got this point settled.
But not documented, is my point.
Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Sure.
State your name then.
So Kathy Kaufman, and it sounded like we were just trying to distinguish between what was a boarder under the village code and what is an Airbnb guest.
I just want to mention that I don't think it's correct for us to intertwine the use of Airbnb and short-term rental, because not all short-term rentals are Airbnb. And the argument that Airbnb has their regulations doesn't apply to other short-term rentals.
Companies and any other way.
Well, any individual is
Yeah.
not going to do it through
Yeah.
Airbnb, then you don't have the self-policing that Airbnb
Does
has.
it on Craigslist?
Who'd like to speak next?
Is there any additional insurance involved? If somebody
Please,
does.
can you just come up and get the
You have
microphone?
to come up and say your name. We can't hear and we don't know what.
I'll bring them in, Steve, since I'm the person that started the bad.
Thank you.
Now you're leading by example the other way.
Yeah.
I wondered what the effect of new insurance on the people who are doing these rentals.
Do we-
And also Greenberg taxes, would that be involved, the town of Greenberg?
We don't have an insurance
Yeah,
requirement.
we don't have an insurance requirement. If you told your homeowner's policy that you're doing this, maybe they would, I don't know.
Yeah, we're
would
not
think so.
having, I actually think Airbnb, some of the other platforms do have
Yes.
insurance requirements, but this doesn't.
And the hotel tax does not apply to this, is my understanding.
You said it
It
does
does not.
not.
And town of Greenberg would be okay with this?
They
Not-
don't have to say it.
My concern, the one night thing is a big concern for me. I feel that's very transient. I feel we live in a small town, and I am still concerned, my children are grown, but I worry about the children of today. And I feel that we're asking for trouble. And if you read enough what has happened around the New York City or Queens or Long Island, where they have had people come in for one night or 2 nights and raised a ruckus. And repeatedly, different groups, but coming in for 1 or 2 nights only. I think you have more of a chance of a problem that way with the transient population.
Okay. Who else? Anyone else? Everyone's too polite.
Do you want me to come up or can I?
You can stay there.
As long as you state your name and
Well,
speak
yes.
in the microphone, we can't hear. Right?
On TV.
As long as we can hear him on TV.
But we can't hear. We can't hear.
Okay, David Swalwell, Irvington, New York, 20-some years, senior citizen. I applaud the board for taking the energy and time to support a concept of short-term rentals, Airbnb, etc. I have to echo an awful lot of what was just said. I travel quite a bit, and I'm an Airbnb user.
That was a ruckus?
That shocks me that there's ruckuses involved. I don't.
Going back a couple.
Yeah, I don't have hard facts, but my guess is the dangers about oddness with Airbnbs is related to the cities. I generally stay in Airbnbs more in suburban settings. Even the thought that there would be some sort of danger to the people involved, I find just very, very improbable. So I support the village in supporting a Airbnb law or acceptance of Airbnb. I do share, I have 2 concerns. One was that 90-day only limitation. And my understanding is that the majority of Airbnb type renters, people who do this, outside of the bad players in center cities, the rest of the world, the bulk of Airbnb, are senior citizens, with a majority being women. So I consider this to be a women's issue and a senior citizens issue. These are homes that are being used that they want to stay in their home, and they need extra income to do it. So by doing this, that's what we're supporting. I hear you, Ryan, suggesting that the 90 days is limit per year is a initial something that you would reconsider, perhaps, if there are not problems. I still feel that that's a little shy. If somebody's going to go to the trouble of doing this, if I'm going to say, okay, well, I've got my kids' bedrooms and I'm not using them, but realistically, if I am going to do this, I want to maintain some of my own personal lifestyle, so I'm going to have to reorganize my house a little. Maybe that, my kid's bed isn't good enough. I have to throw that out, and I have to buy a new double bed or a queen bed, Nobody sleeps in a double bed anymore. You're going to sleep in a queen bed, If I'm going to do this, I may want to go out and spend money to do that. But if I realize, well, I can only do it 9 days a year, and so that I consider that a limiting factor, and I would love for you to start a little heavier on that and maybe backtrack if you have to. The other issue is the fee issue. I can agree strongly that one of the biggest problems in this village, other than speeding, which we've had a lot of problems trying to solve, is noise pollution. And the landscaping issue, we're only charging them $25. And we're not checking, we don't have any enforcement that's going on, we're not checking their equipment, we're not measuring their equipment, we're not having any building inspector or any other inspector going out and looking at those people. They're the people that should be paying the $250 fee, and not the homeowner who is doing that. Excuse me while I shut this
Someone
off.
disagrees. It's a landscaper.
Right, yeah, exactly. Airbnb booking. No, I'm not running Airbnb at the moment. I find the $250 fee a little high, particularly, once again, if it's a senior, if it's a single senior woman who's thinking, well, again, maybe I ought to upgrade my alarm system for a security issue. And that's going to cost me, so just to get into this business is going to cost me a little bit of money, and I have to pay it to it. All of a sudden, it's going to cost me, $2,000 to get started. And, that becomes a hurdle. So I would like to reduce the hurdles for those people that are necessary. Now, in terms of party rentals, I completely agree. In fact, when I look at this legislation, I'm not sure I see enough in there to prevent the party rental problems that we've had in the past. I mean, it's sort of in there.
It's not sort of in there, it's in there. It says it can't be used for parties and events, and if it's clear, you don't need a bunch of paragraphs about it.
Okay, well, if you're confident that that's going to solve our party issue in this town, our party noise problem issue in this town, of course, a lot of it,
It's your own kids.
It's our own kids, exactly.
Well, that's
Okay, so thank you for considering this. Thank you for doing this. I would love to see the fee a little bit less to make it more accessible, and the time period that someone can rent it for a little bit longer.
Okay,
Thank you.
Who's next?
Just say goodbye, Vice
Thank you, Kathy, for facilitating the meeting.
You know, it's February, March. It's the only time I get to move now.
People can see you.
Sure. Claire Halleck, and just to, I live in Ardsley Park, and my just comment is to add to, it's just different perspectives. When I hear this in the room, somebody from the village, somebody maybe in another part of the town, live in a part of the town where there are some houses, historic houses, some not so historic, but large, and the market is very difficult these days, sadly, in terms of selling them. So these houses are languishing on the market for years, literally years, and people are looking for alternatives to make money, or just go away in the summer and make some money, and that's where our problem is. So I can see the difficulty you guys are having balancing these competing interests, but please keep in mind that those 90-day limits and things like that are this is where it's happening. This is part of where this is happening, and so we have concerns about 90 days being awfully broad, because if you divide that up and you look at a summer, which is the logical time that people are going to be coming up here, you can be renting your house out all the time, and that could really impact the neighborhood feel that I purchased my home for, and that could and frankly could further, if it's possible, damage the housing prices where we are. I mean, if that starts happening and people, let's not go trying to get rid of my home now at the tax base I have. But the flip side to making money on Airbnb is my desire eventually to sell the house at a price that is worthy. And if I have a neighborhood that's disintegrated, that's going to put extra, pressure on my ability to sell the house at the price that I would like. So, I just want to give a counterbalance to other people who live in other parts of the town. So.
Great. Hi, Board. It's Nicholas Moore. How are you? I'm at 9 Hancock Place in Irvington, and we've been in Irvington since 2003. And I'm here speaking on behalf of myself as well as a POA. We probably bored of my repeated comments before you folks and concerns about expanding property rights from residential into sort of a commercial purposes. We have gone ahead and appeared before you multiple times to go ahead and express about our concerns about a single bad actor in our neighborhood who has gone ahead and in the past abused a non-existent right that he believes he has, and has gone to the detriment of the neighborhood, of the community, with loud music, trespassing, blocking, litter. The list goes on. We have gone ahead and documented here, both in speech as well as in multiple writings, this issue, and it still is before us. It hasn't gone away. We don't believe that it's been satisfactorily repaired or addressed. So one of the things that I'm going to turn over, let our attorney go ahead and speak on our behalf, but we want to go ahead and make sure that the village, if it does go ahead and pass this regulation, this ordinance, that which really does expand individuals' property rights into more of a commercial purposes, where it may not necessarily be appropriate in a residential neighborhood, that the village work with us. Please hear our recommendations with regard to enforcement, because we believe that we are making these suggestions in a positive, constructive light, and we believe we are also at the short end of the stick on this particular issue now, as history presents itself and as we've gone ahead and documented to you. Thank you.
This is slightly revised from a draft you received, I believe, Friday. And I will highlight quickly the differences or the changes. I did email your village administrator this earlier today, so you have it electronically.
I think Mary Ann should go. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
This was, we haven't seen this before.
This was
Different
slightly
version.
revised.
No, she said she revised it, but it's other different.
Yes, it's slightly revised, and I will go through the, oops. Maybe I am tall enough. Okay. So, good evening, Mayor Smith, members of the Board of Trustees. I'm Kristen Wilson, here representing APOA. We've met several times before. And first, I want to say I applaud you for trying to regulate this type of use. It's not easy. I did do a lot of looking myself. California and Miami, Florida have some pretty significant legislation on the books, but that is not really applicable to a small village like Irvington. So you might be the guinea pigs with Westchester County legislation with respect to short-term rentals. But I think a lot of what you have in your code right now, or your proposed law, is very helpful. There are some key points, though, that I think the board should consider that are both procedural in nature and substantive. Procedurally, and one thing that I added since the Friday letter was considering this law to be a pilot law or have a sunset provision in it for a year, so that it would expire automatically a year after it's adopted. It really just forces the Village Board of Trustees to take another look at it within a year. It's not voluntary, you have to do it. Maybe in 10 months you have to start looking at it again, so that if it is a year registration or a year-long permit, within 12 months you have to look at it again, see if it needs to be tweaked at all. So I strongly recommend This is a new process. Let's see how it works. Along those same lines, it can only work if it's enforced. So I see that you, one of your provisions is to enforce it like one of your typical building code violations. One of the articles that's circulating out there, and I'm happy to forward it to you, is that, at least in Miami, they had to bring up their fees, their fines, to thousands of dollars to make it actually a detriment to issue a short-term or have a short-term rental that wasn't permitted. So the $250 a day with per-day violations, it's not enough for a deterrent. We really want to make sure people comply with these regulations so that your visitors are safe. So that's more of a procedural issue with the sunset provision and a substantive request with the enforcement provision to really hike up the monetary penalties and also put in a 3 strikes and you're out type provision. That if you're a bad actor and you're a consistent bad actor, you're almost blacklisted. You can't have a permit for a couple of years after that. One of the initial issues that struck me in APOA was that there's no real permit process. It reads, and I guess what the intention was to read like, you register and as long as you meet these requirements, you're good to go. But whether it's for safety reasons, for community character reasons, or just for the public right to be heard, we think some type of permit process is necessary. Whether it's from this board or the planning board, it has to be something more than even just a film permit. This is a new use. This use is not permitted. So with that potential change in intensity of use, we think the neighbor should have a right to be heard. Moreover, if your neighbor is renting out their home for the summer, I think it's only best if your neighbors know that you should expect transient visitors. So we think some type of actual review process, maybe it's a truncated review process, but some place where a public board meets, hears residents' concerns, maybe there's a particular parking issue in that neighborhood, maybe there's something else, but that there be a permit process in place, not just a registration. Some communities have also put things on lists online. We think here it would be great if a resident could look online and see, okay, these 5 homes in my neighborhood have registered, have a permit. So we can expect that, 5 out of the 30 permits are within this 200-meter radius or whatever it might be. That's something easy the village can do that just gets the word out. People should be able to know what the properties are being used for if it's not just your typical single-family home use. We also think, and this is another change from the letter on Friday, but after considering the 90-day limit, which I agree, you don't know if that's the right number, but start somewhere. But perhaps more impactful is the number of weekends that people can rent out their homes. That's when people are home more often. That's when kids are home. That's when also parties do occur. So if you're in a neighborhood, especially when we know of some short-term rentals that are going on right now illegally, 90 days is almost every weekend of the year. So we originally suggested, we thought maybe 15 was reasonable, but after thinking about it some more, that could be every weekend in the summer. So we suggest 8 weekends or some type of, you can't have it back-to-back weekends, so you take up the entire, your entire 90 days on the long weekends in the summer or on 3-day weekends when people are home. So we think that type of limitation should be closely looked at. Another way to address the neighborhood by neighborhood impact, because having this type of use on Main Street in Irvington is very different than in single-family homes, neighborhoods, or other mixed-use communities, is consider regulating this or permitting it in a zone-by-zone basis. Start off downtown, see if it works, or maybe allow 25 downtown and 5 in predominantly single-family home resident districts.
or try out the impacts, see what the impacts are first in areas that are more able to absorb those types of impacts, that are more readily capable of responding to having transient visitors around. So we think that having a blanket permission throughout the village, regardless of the zone you're in, regardless of what the neighborhood is, should be looked at a little bit more closely, and maybe you should consider doing it zone by zone. So those are the main highlights. I have more suggestions and recommendations in my letter, but again, we think this is a good first step. We'd just like to take a closer look at some of these things.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, thanks for doing this and letting me speak. It's been very generative. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and this has been a very interesting conversation, and I'm glad I got to hear concerns of neighbors from different neighborhoods and perspectives, because we don't often get to do that, or it just doesn't happen. I just wanted to say a few things for context, and I think I'll probably write a follow-up letter later with like more specific thoughts. But my general thinking, I just wanted to put out there that this is somewhat of an ahistorical conversation. When we prior to our living in our house, I spoke with some of my older neighbors, John Seuss, who lived across the street his whole life on North Ecker, and he told me about all the different boarders who had lived in my house at 28 North Ecker over the years. So there had been, periods of time historically when many of the houses in the village were occupied by boarders and people who came and went as economic necessity required it. And I think it's just, for me, I always think about that when I think about my neighborhood, the village itself. I guess one of my big just macro concerns I wanted to throw out is I'm concerned that I feel like people want to do things legally. Everybody in our village would really feel more comfortable if they did things in a regulated way and conformed with the regulations. So I would like to, hopefully to have an apparatus that allows people without tremendous, burden to undertake this legally if they're inclined to be a host of a short-term rental and not feel that they have to kind of go underground on the black market. I know that a lot of real estate rentals, long-term rentals in the village transact kind of off the record, which is fine. That's legal. But I think that if we kind of over-regulate, I think it will be very difficult for people to do this legally, and I think it'll end up causing them, either, as people have said, to not do this at all because it'll be too burdensome and too financially expensive, but I think also it'll just be too daunting. And the nice thing about short-term rentals is that the barriers to entry are not so high, and so it's accessible to people who don't have a lot of means. And I think that's one of the reasons why $250 sounded like a lot to me, because you're talking about, if $250 is nothing to you, you probably aren't thinking about doing this. So it's a little bit, to me, I see the current writing of the draft rules as being burdensome, really. And both, I think I feel concerned about the inspection regime being a little bit over the top in terms of requiring, people already have concerns about all the permitting that goes into changing their homes, and then it creates an entrance for somebody to come into your home. And that's not true for long-term rentals. So I think in a lot of ways, in my mind, I'm always comparing this, well, how does this compare to long-term rentals in terms of the costs and burdens to the homeowner?
Well, I would like to think that, if what you said earlier, that people want to do things by the book, that they wouldn't be doing, to me, the safety thing is huge. Like, if you have bad electric or, the back door is nailed shut, like, to me, I want that. To me, that's the key to this. And the thing that I like the most about this is that you're going to have the building inspector check out where these people are staying. Because I've read horror stories, again, attics, where they literally put a ladder up, they can take it down at night. but they can rent that, you know, like, to me, that's like, if one person died because we let them rent out a house, it's a disaster, you know, so to me, the only way we can kind of cover that is by having a thorough inspection. And if you don't want someone in your house because you did illegal work or it's not safe, like, to me, that's not a reason. And I think that's the reason that it's $250 is that, you know, the building inspector or the building inspector's assistant's time is
Expensive.
It's expensive. It's not going to be like, you know, go to the front of the house and you're all good. It's going to be like walking around the house. And I think that's, I mean, I think if there are, you know, other things found that are unsafe, it's almost like a nice thing to know as well. Because I think people sometimes don't think about things that aren't safe. So I think it's almost like a good thing in a lot of ways.
So I appreciate that, but can I just bring that back to my original point, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but my understanding is that those same requirements aren't required of long-term rental
They're not,
owners.
because they're not regulated.
Yeah,
If
so
you-
those
it's
are the
like if
same
you- but it's like if
concerns.
you sell your house, you know, if you're doing all cash deal, then you can do whatever you want to. You could have a dungeon, but, you know, it's, those are just loopholes. I mean, we could say that we're going to inspect everyone's house every Thursday. You know, I don't think we want to do that. But this is we're saying we're going to let strangers into your house. You know, if you're going to have a long-term rental and it's not regulated now, maybe we should regulate sublets, but I don't want to do that. But, you know, like it's just different. It's also longer term. And I think that's what New York State has said, is that for them, they put it up for 30 days. It might be 3. I don't know how long it takes to get comfortable in the house. But for them, someone's, you know, regulated that at the state level that says 30 days or more, you're comfortable in the house. 30 days or less, you're not. So that's a...
So maybe a compromise, because I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you about safety, and I agree with you about the safety of people who are not the owner of the original property, maybe would be to extend the period of time and not require an annual inspection, which would also reduce the burden on the village, which is already, you know, burdened. And anyway, just something to throw out there, that maybe once a year is a lot. And I wanted to just say one thing about the permitting. My concern about the permitting was that if people did feel concerned that the number of permits would run out, that they would perhaps, that people with more means would buy up the permits, thinking, well, maybe I won't, it's like the parking spaces down by Ardsley train station. Like, I think some people, if they could, they would have bought like dozens of them, and then never let them go and never used them. And other people who have less means wouldn't be able to afford. So I think that's just something
it
that...
might be for the first year then, if like, you know, I don't want anyone to ever have these, I buy all 30 of them, which I think you'd have one per house, so you have to organize your friends. So, you know, I organized all my friends, and we had 30 of them, and then there was no issues. You'd be like, great, next year we have 100. You know? And then, you know, the math is you have to have a lot more friends, so I think it's...
A year's a long time, though, if you're trying to make a mortgage and you really... And people are trying to move pretty quickly on finding solutions to be able to stay in the village. Just as, I don't think we have a lot of
You know,
time.
there's probably, of all of the things in here, it's probably the easiest to change if you got up to 30, you know?
Yeah,
You
we could
got 50
simply-
people who wanted to register, and I said, you know, this seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah, or 46, and we're like,
Yeah,
okay, if
yeah,
we have
it's-
16 people, you can do it.
That's pretty easy to, that would be an easy change.
Especially if it's
for
like
me.
we're 3 months in
I'd
and all
say
30 are taken, and we haven't got one complaint.
I would,
you know.
yeah, I would just be really, really surprised.
How do you make that change? Do you have to have a hearing?
Oh, yes.
Same
Yeah,
exact-
public
same
hearing,
exact
it's a
thing.
vote, yeah.
The public hearing and notice, but it would, you know, it can be done within a
It would
month.
literally be just that one line you change, kind of like changing the definition of a person. We probably
Yeah.
won't have as many people to talk about people. Send your letters then.
All right, I think those are my main points. I just also wanted to echo what other people have said, that I do think I actually really care a lot about people being able to stay, and I feel like these kinds of living arrangements, not only are they great for the village, but they're also really great for homeowners, because a lot of people don't want to live alone all the time, and they enjoy this kind of interaction. And I think there's something really, and I obviously different strokes for different folks, but for a lot of people, especially for people who have chosen to live in a high-density neighborhood, like the Main Street neighborhood, are looking for, to hear from their neighbors on the weekend. They want to hear that someone's alive and kicking next
And I do
door.
think that you having someone stay in your house when you're there is a lower risk of having the crazy parties and all that kind of stuff as well. Because the second you're like, this guy's nuts, he's out of here.
They're out. They're out. And whereas long-term tenants, actually, we don't have any kind of control of that sort over. You know, they stay.
Yeah.
And so if they're problematic,
I
they're
will
really
say that
dug
a lot
in.
of the concerns about noise or, you know, drug use and all these things, like, if someone sees any of that going on, you can still call the police. Like, there's already laws in place to fight those things.
Yeah.
So thank you to those
Sure.
are my thoughts.
Thank you. Who else?
You know who I am. I'm Ann Myers. I'm a resident of this village for over 40 years. I'm probably the oldest person in this room. And I'm very direct. I'm against all these changes. And I think that should go on the record. I understand there's been a lot of talk about this issue as being we're a historic community. We want tourism. It's a senior issue. It's a woman's issue. Nobody's mentioned a racial issue yet, but to me, it is a quality of life and residential issue. We are a residential community. Now, families can differ. They could be one person, they could be several people, they could be relatives, children. Brian, you grew up here. You know how it's changed, right?
There's more people here.
We are still a family and residential community. And I think from a lot of the comments tonight, and particularly the ones with regard to use of Airbnb, do you go into a community and think about those people?
We can't hear you.
I know, you. Yes, yes.
You can take the mic off.
Take the mic away.
Do you go into a community and think about those families there and those children there? I know that you're a wonderful tenant as Airbnb, but it truly changes the quality of the community. It's no longer a neighborhood of people that you know, friends, children playing in the streets. I can tell you that it becomes a transient community. I mean, what you're talking about is really creating, if you say it's 1,100 households, it could be 1,100 small hotels. It is a different community. And I think you really need, and it changes the quality of life in terms of who lives here, who's committed to the community. Yes, they may use the resources, the restaurants, and everything. But I can tell you, when I started 30 or 40 years ago on beautification, I could work on Main Street and know everybody that walked up and down that street. And they knew what we were doing, and they knew why we were doing it. It's different now, and I know times change, but I am resistant to allowing this to change our wonderful community, where I have 2 children that have decided to move into this community, and they were appalled by these changes, really. And, you know, it's kind of sad, and I wish that you would think about...
I do think one of the reasons we're thinking of doing this is to allow people to stay in the community that have been here. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, where we have, the biggest complaint I get isn't that there's transient people or people that people don't know, it's that I can't afford to stay here anymore. And to me, this is something that we're trying to do to address that. And I think that's why we didn't say you could just rent out your house and that, you know, you could have 16 families coming into a one family.
Well, I'm not so sure about how that works out in terms of rent. When you talk about a family and a host, or, you know, a one family guest, how are you going to control who they have come? Maybe they have 20 friends that are going to fill those, you know, 6 to 10 bedrooms. And you're not going to be able to control that. And the other main fact, and I've experienced this with the mercy permits and other things, and nothing that I've read in this draft convinces me that there's any effective enforcement. I mean, who do you call? You call somebody in 30 minutes. They don't pick up the phone, so you call somebody else. They don't pick up the phone. It's the weekend. Nobody's working here. How do you create a working environment where those people that do feel there's a problem have an outlet, an effective outlet to change, whether it's abuse or whatever it is? I mean, I know with mercy permit and parking, there's nobody on the police force that even knows what's in that permit. Really, I've talked to the policeman, the chief, they have no idea that it's not allowed to park on the village streets if you're a Mercy student or whatever. And so I think you really, if you're going to go down this path, which I disagree with.
Which is interesting. The most I saw when I've ever looked at Airbnb is 27 homes at Irvington listed at any one time. So let's just say that half of those were ever rented. We've already had 13 or 15 at a time. So, you know, we haven't had, other than one bad actor who wasn't for renting to overnight people, is because he had weddings and parties. You know, so I think that this is already going on, so it's not like we've come up with this novel idea.
Well, that makes my point. There is no enforcement.
Well, that's part of the problem.
I mean, it's against the law, and there's no enforcement.
But
so if it's part of the law and there's still a problem, how are you going to enforce it? And how are you going to satisfy the residents that have a problem with it?
We can add a layer of enforcement that's much easier to enforce.
Can you tell me what that's going to be?
Well, once you have a permit, you can no longer have your permit. So if you get rid of your permit, then that makes it a lot more, you know, if someone's doing this, and we can even just see it listed in one of the major places, they don't have a permit, it's very much easier to shut them down. Right now, if someone lists something, that's not just kind of like talking to our, you know, our prosecutor, just printing off that you have it listed, even if you say every date is booked, because you can actually say, I booked every date because I want to hold those dates. And
okay, well, we're talking about different issues here. You're talking about people that haven't registered and are breaking the law.
Yes, or if that, now, so I'm saying, if someone does something, if your neighbor rents out their house and you don't like the fact that they always leave their garbage cans unturned, and you know that becomes a big enough issue.
So what do you do?
You can call the police. You can when we have the renewal, you can write in letters that this person always is a bad actor.
Renewal, that's in 6 to 9 months, once
Correct.
a year.
There is also a provision that, about revocation of the registration, that the Board of Trustees can revoke it if they find.
If someone had a wedding
material
at their
breach
house,
of
it'd be
the-
immediately revoked the next Monday, which we couldn't do now. You know, you don't have anything to revoke.
Well, I'm not talking about big events. And of course, I'm getting away from my main point, which, regardless of all these abuses that one might anticipate, think about how it changes the quality of life of our community.
I'm just saying that it's been going on for years, and
you've seen a change in the quality of life of our community.
Okay, I personally disagree with that, but that's going to be everyone's eye of the beholder on if this is a good place to live or not. I mean, one thing is that I've seen a huge turnover in people. You know, a lot of new families in town because people can't afford the taxes, and that's one of the cruxes of why we're here talking about this.
Mickey Gordon. I've lived in this village for 26 years now. I also walk down the street and don't know a lot of people, but that's because they moved here from Brooklyn. And I'm here basically in support of this, for the reasons that have been stated about enabling people to remain in their homes, and for the benefits that it would bring to the village of people using our restaurants and stores and so on. I am not the traveler that Ann or David are. I have never stayed in an Airbnb or any other short-term rental. But I do know people who rent out their homes in various places around the country. They all know that, they will express that it's a positive experience for them, they haven't expressed any problems. I grew up in a house in Millbrook, New York, upstate, that had 10 rooms, and after my father died, my mother took in boarders. And it helped her stay in the house for a few years before she moved to an assisted living retirement community. I personally know many people in this village who are up against it. They were up against it before, and now with the reassessment and the taxes, they're really up against it. And they want to stay here, and I think we want them to stay here. I think overall, this would be a positive, that the benefits that this would bring to the village, with the proper regulation that you are providing for, with what you have here with tweaks, would outweigh potential negatives, and it does come down to enforcement. And I have my sympathy for the people who have been suffering with the bad actor. And I do think that enforcement of whatever regulation you put in place, with revocation of the registration, with fines, that those controls will help avoid the kinds of unpleasant experiences. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Otherwise, we are going to keep this open as we work through all the comments. We're in no rush. We'd rather get this as close to right as we can. I think we've heard some good suggestions tonight already. I think that, we have to take it all together and work our way through it again. But we'll keep this open. We're open for comments. Send us your emails, your letters, or come back. We don't like having these meetings by ourselves. So, we appreciate you all coming out on a cold night after a snowy morning. So please stay for the rest of it if you like. If you don't, you won't hurt our feelings.
So Brian, I had one question before you totally finish this up. I was just thinking back when we talked about our registration process. Would that list of registered short-term rental places, wouldn't that registration list be public, be online, available to anybody who wanted to see it?
Yeah, we
Okay.
talked about that, but that doesn't have to be in the law.
No, I was just trying to remind
Yeah, we did
myself
talk
that
about it.
it's a public list, and whether it's
Okay,
online or,
permit, yeah.
okay.
You can check by, search by address or whatever. Thank you, Brenda, for reminding me about, we did receive some correspondence. I'm not going to read the entire thing, especially for some of them. What we'll do is we'll actually publish these for the next meeting. These came in too late, but I know some of them were very anxious to be officially on the record, so I don't want them to shut out of meeting one, and we'll make sure we publish them for meeting two. The first one is from Bernstein and Associates, whose counsel to the owner of Villa Witz, 16,000 square foot private home built in 1852. I think some of us may be familiar with it, on 2 Clifton Place. Talks about how it's a historic home. He goes on to say the proposal unreasonably restricts existing rights of nearly all individuals and Irvington homeowners to allow their homes to be used for this purpose. He believes if enacted, the measure would violate the constitutional and statutory rights of individual Irvington homeowners who depend on the income they receive from STRs to stay in their homes. He goes on from there. He basically says that we're being discriminatory against 97.5% of single-family homeowners if we only allow 30. And actually, if you restrict it the number of days, it goes down to only 0.75%, or 75 basis points of people will have the rights. It's a multi-page document, but I'm here. I feel like we should have Paul Feiner read this for us. It's from his friend, Mr. Bernstein. What else we got here? He talks about the benefits of STRs, which were some of those things were described tonight. Again, we will publish this entire thing for your reading pleasure, but let me get down to where they're going to sue us. Not only the proposal ordinance satisfy the requirements of unconstitutional regulatory taking, its enactment would also be equivalent of outlawing illegal non-conforming use, which municipalities are now permitted to do in New York State without providing just compensation. He mentions APOA. I could read this for the next 4 hours. Recently drafted proposed ordinance appears to be unlawful for the additional reason that it does not bear a substantial relation to the legitimate state interest. Legitimate, I think he means stated interest. First proposal limits STRs only 30. As we already kind of gone over that part. Following that these issues are not unique to Irvington, in every case, after giving the matter serious consideration, it comes no surprise that lawmakers thought the better of the idea. Thus, the New York State Legislature, which could have had enacted laws either regulating the sharing economy or authorizing municipalities to impose such regulation of their own, opted only to amend the state's municipal dwelling law and only for the city of New York. Thus, restrictions on SDRs were adopted only for apartments in New York City and only because of the impact SDRs appear to be having on available inventory of affordable housing. This is not to say, however, the village may not impose regulations intended to ensure that dwellings used for SDRs meet all fire safety and building codes. We believe that the village can and should impose such regulations. So he liked that part. But sincerely, Robert B. Bernstein. And again, we'll publish that. It is a 6-page letter, small print.
Single print.
Yes.
And there were some other letters earlier, too.
Yeah, those are much shorter.
Deal specs. They were just forwarded to them today, and so was that, so, I mean, we can't.
Claire Cornish, I'm writing in response to what I see as unnecessary stringent policies being imposed upon short-term rentals in Irvington. Renting sites such as Airbnb allow residents to make use of extra space in their homes, often through periods of difficulty such as unemployment, retirement, or long illness. The $250 registration fee seems unfairly high and is targeting those residents who are least able to pay. Rental sites require property owners to have their houses up to code, to have fire and carbon monoxide places, etc. Subjecting homeowners to inspections from the building department seems intrusive, unnecessary. During the time that my husband and I rented a room in our house through Airbnb, we met a diverse range of people, young people attending local weddings and unable to afford local hotel prices, women training at stone barns, conducting research at the Botanical Hills Research Library, a man needing to stay in the village to be close to his dying father, and many people using it for the weekend to see local sites such as Kykuit and Bellsburg Manor. Almost everyone we stayed with us walked the aqueduct in Irvington and hit our lovely lunch spots, thereby helping the economy. I urge you to look again at the proposal and make changes which are reflective of an Irvington that is welcoming to visitors and outsiders. Actually, Brenda supported me one. My name is Catherine O'Keefe, and I'm a long-term resident of Irvington. I support the short-term rentals, particularly Airbnb. I personally rented a house using Airbnb. Airbnb is self-policing, backgrounds are checked, references must be provided, and a host can see reviews and correspond with the guest in advance. Short-term rentals are a way to supplement income to help people stay in their homes, etc. I believe that the limit on someone's days rent should be increased to 190 days, and that stays longer than 90 days should be permitted. 30 days should be permitted. Also, requiring homeowners to respond to issues within 30 minutes is unfair. Other homeowners aren't bound to that, although a short-term rental host may ensure that they are responsive to get a good rating. Registration of the fee of $250 is too high. It reduces the profit of the homeowner can earn. What is the reason for such a high fee? Neighbors not knowing who is coming or going is a discriminatory argument for trying to keep minorities out and does not make neighborhoods unsafe relative to other activities in Irvington. Subjecting short-term rental hosts to more inspections than other homeowners is unnecessary use of Irvington village personnel. Again, short-term rentals are self-policing. A person who rents their home makes sure it is safe and in good condition to get positive reviews. Catherine O'Keefe, 71 South Buckout.
There was one from Leola's.
There is, yeah, let me find out.
That's a really long one.
Yeah, you might paraphrase some of that. So everyone knows our deadline is Friday to read the letters. So again, we will publish these so everyone can read them in their entirety. We got a nice hello from Leola. I cannot attend the meeting. First, I might borrow Brian's words. The libertarian in me wonders why we need these regulations. We already have noise ordinances, occupancy, and other dwelling safety requirements. Can short-term rental hosts just follow the myriad of rules that are already in place? Many complicated rules make compliance difficult, may not end up having added value. The second important consideration about the regulation is unintended consequences. A little background, Airbnb has been around for more than 10 years, a lot of time to measure results. The type of trust-based home sharing has demonstrated for the most part that short-term renters are honest, careful, and considerate, and home sharing poses an insignificant amount of added risk. That also shows that often middle-aged to older and retired women make great Airbnb hosts and super hosts, a status a host can achieve by being prompt with inquiries, honoring reservations without canceling, providing a clean home and place that is accurately described in the listing, preparing the home, etc. You may also know that the online short-term rental programs are self-policing, that if a host provides unsafe and clean as described, they get a bad rating. Back to unintended consequences, putting expensive, difficult, and limiting regulations around short-term rentals disproportionately discriminates against women. Women earn less than men on average for the same job throughout their careers. Another unintended consequence is lost business to Irvington merchants. Another unintended consequence is racial discrimination. You don't know who's coming and going for specific sections, and then she has some specifics on the law, many of which have been discussed tonight. About 30 days is too short. not to rent to more than one family. Why is that important? I think we talked about that a little bit to kind
And I
of
think
maintain
she
the
didn't
characters.
understand it, because
Yeah.
it doesn't look, like family in this.
Right. Dwelling must have been its present size for 5 years. Short-term rentals are often help a person on a limited income. Person expanded their home, but unforeseen, well, I guess that's actually an interesting point, like if the circumstances change after you put an addition on.
Yeah.
Are there fire et cetera regulations more than a homeowner who doesn't rent their home have to adhere to? If so, why the additional regs for short-term rentals? I think that's, yeah, we talked about that one. A maximum of 90 days is not necessary. Part of self-policing nature. Periodic building and fire inspections. Why subject to short-term rental to this? I think we talked about that ad nauseum tonight. Providing a number of short-term guests and dates upon application is not possible on a look-forward basis.
You don't have to do it on a look forward, it's at the end of the year when you come in for renewal.
I don't see a need for a building inspector if the permit attests that the regulations have been followed. I think that they're more complicated than that. Registration fees are too high. Again, talks about landscapers, seems pretty unrelated. Yeah, I think that's it. Leola Spec, 14 North Continent Street. Again, these will be posted, so everyone can read them in their entirety. I got to put everyone to sleep already with my monotone voice. But thank you, Brenda, for reminding me about the letters we received late. I wanted to get them in the first hearing, because sometimes people get upset if they're not. So, I think that's it for now. We will, again, this will stay open. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Not one person here from the Hudson Beach over.
We have so much more fun.
Out of town travel.
So just, so I understand, will we be talking in a work session about this in more detail?
I think we probably should. About some of the
I think there's a lot of-
Yeah, there's a lot of things to ban you about. Yeah, so I think on next Wednesday we'll talk about it. At least some of the ideas, yeah. I think yes is the answer.
What was the question, and what was the
The
answer?
question was, are we going to talk about this at the work session? And I said, yes. Mark thought that was a good idea.
Oh, okay.
Just so we can ban you about some of the ideas that came up. So I think there's maybe a nice Chinese menu kind of holiday.
Yeah.
I'd like to clarify the issue, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I think we should frame it next Wednesday.
And then hang it on the wall.
I think that's nice to frame. Award of contract 2019-01 for the Hudson View Culvert Replacement Project. Oh, wait, I skipped, I'm sorry. I completely skipped number 8, which is continuation of the public hearing
Right.
requesting a special permit for adaptive use of the historic building, 45 West Glen Avenue.
Right.
This is, to me, very straightforward. I think we're just waiting to hear from the building inspector that all the issues have been resolved. So.
Is it going constructively? That's my
Yeah,
concern.
yes, it is, and there's a meeting scheduled for Friday with Joe Lombardi and Ed Jerry and myself.
Oh, okay, that's,
So there's no
Ed's
obvious.
been in touch with the state, and, so he's ready to tell Joe what's gotta be done, and so there's a meeting Friday.
thank you for that update.
Now back to my award of contract for the Hudson View Park Culvert Replacement Project. As we've talked about this project every night, multiple times in the last few months, this is a very complicated project because it's on Sunnyside Lane, which is it's exactly 2 lanes wide, so this is going to be a engineering feat of some sorts. The benefit, of course, is that there's a stream that runs through that area that the culvert that's currently under Hudson View Park is woefully too small, and it's definitely a bottleneck that leads to flooding all up. It probably won't solve all the flooding, but I think it can solve a lot of the flooding problems, or at least we hope so, which is why we've been working on this almost as long as Connie and I have been on board. We've been talking about this and trying to find funding, because we knew it would be expensive, but I'm fairly happy to say that this is kind of, I think, come in right where we had kind of budgeted for it. So, Brian, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like this is about what I thought in my mind it would cost. So, but if there aren't any, Larry obviously is always our bidding expert, but I think it looks like it came in where it should have. And we got a lot of bids, which is great. That's always
Didn't this qualify for part of a funding because of the census data?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep, I
right.
think, although some of that money was lost with the whole HUD fight, but I think we did find another grant for a big chunk of this, so.
You don't remember?
I know that we had lost the original grant from HUD, but I'm not sure if we got that again or we got a different grant, but.
Do you remember how much it is? No,
It's
I think to put you on the
it's
spot,
a-
because I don't remember either, but.
We can find that out, though, but
Okay.
I think it's a large portion of this.
I put an eye on those sheets.
Absolutely. But, let's go ahead and read it quickly. Whereas 10 bids were received for contract 2019. Oh, sorry.
Forgive me and forgive me if I repeated something you do. Just, I was a little confused where, if maybe we could clarify where it said the village administrator determined that the proposal from McNamee is not responsive and that the second lowest proposal from Landscape Build, but it looks like Landscape was the lowest proposal.
On the base bid, but not on the total. The base bid? The McNamee, I'm sorry, take it back here.
Oh, they got the backwards.
Yeah, no, it seems, you know, I
The second lowest proposal, am I misreading, but isn't,
Responsive.
yeah, Landscape Inc. is actually, Nikki Dix is actually.
I mean, McNamee might not be responsive, but it looks like Landscape was the lowest.
Both the base and the con.
But it also
Maybe
has,
the names got switched around
no,
on
it
this
also
piece
has
of
an
paper. and
asterisk there.
this
Do you see
isn't
the
written
asterisk
right.
there?
Or not, maybe this isn't typed correctly. And
There's a
this is
footnote.
Yeah,
this,
if you look in the-
and this is this. How do we know?
If you look at the back of from the con engineering,
Yeah, that's my concern, that we didn't make sure we have
they
the right.
submitted incorrect bid.
McNamee had to resubmit an update, and I guess that's how it brought them into the second slot, because they were,
I think what happened was they were lower when they get their, and they were gonna win, but actually it was non-responsive when they looked at it. So they had to put in a new bid, and now they're second.
I
So,
got you.
it
Okay,
was
okay,
almost-
that
it was just
clarifies it.
Yeah, almost it doesn't have to be in there
That
now,
clarifies
but.
clear as mud.
I just didn't want to pass something for the wrong guy.
Going through a rainy culvert. But no, yes, you're absolutely right. But it's nice we got 10 bids. Whereas 10 bids were received for contract 2019-01 for the Hudson View Culvert project as follows. They were from a low of Landscape Inc. No, it isn't. Landscape Inc. doing business as Nikki Dix Excavation for the total bid of $832,302.11 to a high of $1,970,080 from PCI Industries Corp. Yeah. So we're going to do the culvert out of solid gold.
No, it's the
Oh.
solid gold fixtures in the Johnny on the spot.
Yeah, they take it with them. Whereas the village administrator reviewed the proposal submitted and determined that the proposal from McNamee Construction Corp. Was not responsive to the specifications, and whereas the village administrator determined the second lowest proposal, which is now the lowest, from Landscape Inc., doing business as Nikki Dix Excavation, is in order in response to the I want a Nikki Dix Excavation t-shirt out of this. The specifications now therefore be it resolved.
Wait. Do you think there's any confusion here that because Larry isn't here, we could just get a simple explanation? Do you feel confident? I feel a little like, is there a way to
Can make it contingent on Larry
contingent upon
explaining our understanding.
rediscussing this?
Because it's still,
It's a big,
even in the memo, it's still,
I think
I would feel more comfortable if it was.
because the revised value is still higher than Nikki Dix in the memo.
Yes, but I'm thinking what happened was the proposal was, this was almost created before they got the revised proposal that's attached. You know what I mean? Like it was, so in other words, it says, no, McNamee Construction bid submission was incorrect, the revised value is reflected in the cost.
Well, we're guessing here.
Yes, well, why don't we do it subject to Larry's
Yes,
agreeing
that's-
with our explanation? Because there is some time sensitivity to getting this
Yeah,
started.
I'm sure it is. But I'm sure he could answer tomorrow and let you know, and you can communicate.
Yes, if there's anything else that we missed, we can We'll put it
This is subject-
subject to Larry's explanation of the difference with McNamee
Right.
Construction.
That's
I'm
better.
perfectly happy.
There was an earlier bid back in February, but McNamee was less.
Yes, I think that's exactly what happened. I just think
Right,
the, I think
just
the,
here.
I think the
I know,
the
it's-
resolution was pre this new memorandum. So they had an old bid that was actually lower. When they went back and said, hey, you didn't do the right thing, they came back with this, but the resolution was outdated. Does that make sense?
That could be, I don't know.
Yeah, but we can confirm with Larry.
So what we think is that Landscape is the one that we should be
Correct.
awarding this to.
Correct.
Yes.
And that's what.
But that is
Conrad
that is
has.
the least expensive on both documents.
Yes, no, but I'm saying, there was a previous document. What happened was, this was made before, this was made like last week,
Okay,
and then that's when they were lower.
okay.
And then it got revised, when they said, oh, now it's responsible.
Right, that was the original, let's say.
And now it's higher because it got revised up. It used to be lower when they had the wrong information.
Got it, okay, got it. Thank you.
So, again, we'll still do a contingent to Larry, saying if my deduction is correct or not, so I didn't talk to him about it.
Okay.
So, second from Mark, all in favor?
Aye.
Again, contingent. Now, a straightforward one, out-of-town travel for the police chief. He's going to Honolulu for 6 weeks.
Take it, all of us.
All of us with him, in an Airbnb. It's going to be fantastic. Resolved to approve the out-of-town travel for Chief Saron to attend the 2019 New York State Intelligence Summit on April 24, 2019 in Saratoga, New York. The cost of the summit not to exceed $150.
Whoa.
I'll make the motion if I can get a second. All in favor?
Isn't it good gas and lodging?
That's what I didn't see it before, that, I'm gonna go back and then.
It can't be 150. There's
It's
no
100
conference in the
It's
It's
world.
$103 for the hotel.
Right,
He's bringing his own food with him.
and there's gonna be, some transportation.
Maybe he's taking his company.
He's going by horseback. He can't even drive.
It's electric car.
Okay.
You can ask him to
Just
come
say
over.
Well, it sound, I read it tonight, only that it sounded a little.
It sounds low.
Why doesn't somebody run over and no, he's not.
If we're off by a factor of 2, I think we're good. Resolved to approve the out-of-town travel for Officers Burlier and Tulin to attend the 44th Annual Conference of the New York State Police Juvenile Officers Association from August 26th to 30th, 2019 in Lake George, New York. The cost of the conference not to exceed $1,200. I'll make a motion if I get a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Reports of boards, standing committees and officers, trustee liaison reports. Mr. Gila?
I don't have anything at the moment.
Larry's got to have a correct one, huh?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't get it today, so I feel we'll have a little.
Handbooks for Teamscape 2019 are now available at Parks and Rec. Limited spots remain for the off-season winter Teamscape program. That's the Mystery Room in the Palisades. Registration for the 2019 Youth Baseball and Softball program is still open. There are openings for the 2019 Adult Softball Leagues for teams interested in playing, and we have an over 40 league, a co-ed league, and an open league, and the season starts in April. Dates and fee schedules for the 2019 Summer Day Camp has been released. Registration starts April 6th. Early bird fees are a must for anyone committed to this program. Residents are asked to please pick up and take their dog bags with them when in the woods or at Halsey Pond. These dogs must be on leash in the woods in Halsey Pond. And finally, there will be 4 youth basketball teams representing the village in the Westchester County Youth Basketball Tournament this month. Contact Angela Thornton for additional information.
That's it?
I believe there's a performance market this Saturday.
Yes.
Second and fourth? Second and fourth. I don't have anything, I don't have any highway department, I don't have any theater, I don't have anything, but you might want to talk about the
Oh, we had
the fundraiser.
They had a fundraiser Saturday night. I think we had 234 tickets sold. So
Wow.
it was a pretty good turnout. The bands were unbelievable. It was a lot of fun. It was.
How was the beer, Brian?
The beer was cold. It was cold and flavorful from our friends at Captain Lawrence Brewing. So it was a good night, had by all. Everyone's on the best behavior, and It wasn't too loud. The music was actually loud. You could hear it from outside.
Oh.
No one complained. But it was fun. It was definitely a great night. We had 2 bands, and we did pretty well. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Did you have any else?
No, I don't have any. The highway department is too busy doing highway
To
department
do
things to
paperwork.
send some report.
Village Court, to nobody's great surprise, had out of 161 charges disposed, 154 of them were vehicle and traffic. Fines collected between 128 and 31, 19,835, surcharges 9,329, civil fees 852 for a grand total of $30,000, $1650. For the library, we are honored to have the wonderful artwork of Marguerite Pizer in the Martucci Gallery this month. Is she the
Yes.
related to the?
She was married to the late,
The
Mayor
mayor,
Pizer.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, okay.
And Congressman.
There will be an artist reception on Saturday, March 9th at 2 p.m. Also, Telemann in Paris, the trustee concert on Sunday, February 25th, performed by the Baroque Quartet Tableau Vivant with standing room only, so lots going on at the library. The library is migrating to a new catalog system. All online services will not be available between March 11th and 13th, and we will have limits to checkouts during that time. We go live with the catalog on March 14th. For more information, consult the library website. And I love this paragraph, so maybe somebody can explain it after I read it. For anyone who is mystified about how to download or stream books, audiobooks, music, movies from the library's offerings such as Overdrive, Hoopla, and Canopy, we will have a special info session, which I probably should attend, on Saturday, March 16th at 2:30. Bring your library cards and handheld devices, and after an introductory lecture, library staff will be on hand to assist in accessing any of these wonderful offerings. Finally, between the covers and into the stacks, a literary scavenger hunt through the Irvington Library, which was great
This
fun
is
last
fun.
year.
This
This
is
is really fun.
fun.
This will be Friday, March 15th at 7. Tickets now on sale. Teams named after famous fictional detectives hunt for the books indicated in the clues. Lots of food, eateries from the village and beverages are being brought in, and amazing silent auction baskets and certificates. Ticket price is $50 per person, and sounds like it was really fun last year, so please consider going.
Excellent. Now would be usually when Larry gave his administrator's report. We would like to extend the sympathies to Larry and his family, the passing of his mom, Elvira Grace Schaffler. Today was actually the funeral, so our thoughts and prayers are with Larry and his family tonight. So we miss you, Larry, and look forward to you coming back. Village Clerk Treasurer's report.
We're still working on the budget for 2019-20. We've delayed tonight's presentation to the next workshop.
Village Attorney's report. Public comment. Review of action items. Anyone have anything?
I have one, but it's not fair since Larry's not here. I wanted to know if there was updated status about the lights on the library.
Right. Can you
I don't
follow?
know anything.
Can you just follow up?
Yeah, you can do that.
Otherwise, I will make a motion to adjourn. If I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carries.